No, we're going to have a guest speaker today.
You are live.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. So today we are going to have our guest speaker, Aakin Patel, speak today. He is with the Cybersecurity of Defense.
Yeah, the Office of CyberDefence.
The Office of CyberDefense. Sorry about that. Yeah, he's with the Office of CyberDefense. He's going to talk a little bit about himself. Has his own little presentation here for us today. I'll go ahead, have him come up, and then I'll pass on the mic for him, and he can go ahead and start his presentation. And here you go.
Need a little more slack. There we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Aakin Patel. I am currently the head of the Nevada Office of Cyber Defense Coordination. And I guess they wanted me to come talk a little bit about what my career path was, how I ended up where I am, like what I do, and then answer any questions that you might have about whatever. I'm a pretty informal speaker. I just kind of ramble, and feel free to like ask questions as I go or reel me back on track. It's all good. Just a little bit about my background. I started off in IT and cybersecurity a little over 20 years ago. I followed what was the standard path for most IT people back then, which is a very unconventional path right now. My degree had almost nothing to do with IT. There weren't really that many IT degrees back then. There were no cybersecurity degrees. I started off with a bachelor's of science in geology and atmospheric science with a minor in computer science. And I started doing simulation modeling in grad school. And I did a lot of plate tectonic modeling until I decided I didn't want to be in academics for my life. And I was like, I'm just going to get a job in computer science until I figure out what I want to do with my life, because I was very good at building computer systems through computer modeling. And it's now 25 years later, I haven't figured out what to do with my life yet. But so I started work as a Unix admin, working with the bonds trading systems in New York City, because that was the systems I did my simulation modeling on and what I was very familiar with. And I went from there to working with the Department of Energy at a national lab, Brookhaven National Lab in New York, as a part of their Unix team. And I worked on all kinds of really weird Unix systems, including little embedded systems that ran particle accelerators and really strange devices that were like one-offs that were custom built by these scientists who were very bent on building their own system and not taking something off the shelf. And so we had some really weird and interesting projects, and I got very good at troubleshooting really weird and interesting and bizarre Unix problems as a result. So at some point, I think around the 2002, 2003 timeframe, the Department of Energy realized that cybersecurity was starting to become a real problem, especially where they were, because they did a lot of classified research, and there were a lot of other countries that were very interested in the research, so they were always attacking their systems, and they're always trying to defend them and clean them out. So they actually started pulling experts from all the various fields to make their big cybersecurity teams, and they pulled me in as their Unix expert. And that's kind of how I ended up in cybersecurity, because back then cybersecurity wasn't really a career path or a thing. It was just like they just picked someone who was good at something and said, you just focus on defense now. So I kind of jumped onto the cybersecurity side at that time, and I had a lot of fun and got like pretty good at that and kind of became a technical cybersecurity person. I started doing pen tests to help test our systems and worked with the DOE Red Team for a while. I spent most of my time doing security architecture and building better systems and like helping other teams that were actually deploying their systems to actually secure them and lock them down. And that's been the bulk of what I ended up doing for a lot of my career. I went from the Department of Energy to like a big nationwide SOC. For a while, I went and worked with the hospitality sector here, worked with them to help secure their systems. I did some small business consulting for a while. I ended up at the county at the airport, and I actually ended up leading their cybersecurity team there. I was, and then from there, I ended up in the position where I am now, where I'm managing cybersecurity defense across all the various public entities, like all the various government groups in the state. I work with them all to kind of coordinate our activities to make sure that everyone's on the same page, that we're doing stuff together, and that like when we have issues that span agencies, we just kind of work coherently and well together to kind of get things done in an efficient manner. So now my job isn't very technical anymore. It's more on the politics and communication and coordination side. But I became good at my job because I came up on the technical side, and I became very good at dealing with very specific technical problems on the Unix side, and from there moving on to all the various problems across the board by becoming a security architect and working to secure systems across the board, no matter what they were, whatever like the various places I worked for needed to get secured. So that's in a gist of it is kind of was my career path, even though it wasn't really planned out as this is what I'm going to do, because like I said, when I was at your stage in life, that was not really an option that people had or like a career that people had. But it's been how I ended up where I am now, and it's kind of still how a lot of people end up in cybersecurity. They become really good at something in IT and then kind of focus on it from a security perspective. Because in the end, that's kind of what cybersecurity is for the most part, right? It's taking some other aspect of IT and some other aspect of security and working to deal with that aspect of IT in a secure manner, right? I mean, how many of you guys play MMOs or like RPGs are out there? Quite a lot, I see. You know, in a lot of games, you start off as a basic class, and then you end up going like a prestige class. Cybersecurity is like a prestige class for most of IT, right? No matter what field of tech you're in, there is a cybersecurity component to it down the line. You could be a network engineer and then I'm doing network security. You could be a Windows admin and I'm doing Windows security. You could be a technical writer and end up going into cybersecurity policy writing, right? It doesn't matter what field of technology you're in, there's a cybersecurity component to it. And the key thing to being good at cybersecurity is being good at one aspect of IT. And that is something that a lot of people miss. So that was kind of one of the things that I kind of wanted to make sure that people are aware that a lot of it is being good at something in technology and then thinking about that thing from a security perspective. I see you guys have the Hacker Manifesto on the wall. That's kind of a great piece of writing. The mindset they describe is kind of great because there's a line in the middle there somewhere. It's exactly what it is, but it's about like finding out a discovery in tech and like going down through it and like finding like a cool thing in that world and then digging deep into that world. And that's kind of what you all need to be doing, I feel. That's what I've had to do my entire career, and that's something that doesn't really ever change. You're always digging because technology is always changing, and you're always learning more about it and learning to dig into it and see the holes in it, because that's kind of the key. You can't see the holes in something until you understand that thing and understand where there shouldn't be holes, because otherwise it just kind of looks like something that's normal. So building up that skill is pretty important to becoming good in security. I think I kind of rambled a little bit there for a little bit, but I hope that kind of made sense. Real quick before I continue onwards, are there any like questions that people have or anything that people want me to focus on?
Yes, yeah. So what areas would you recommend to specialize in today?
Whatever is interesting to you, because there's no part of technology that's not needed in the world, right? Like everyone still uses Windows computers. The internet still runs on Unix computers. Network engineers are always common. You need networking everywhere. IoT is a big thing now. People still use radio communications. I work for the state, And there's large parts of this state that have no internet backbone except through microwave relays. So actually understanding how radio systems work is pretty important for those jobs. And there's a whole group of people that work on that. Like, there isn't an aspect of technology that has been abandoned and is no longer relevant. I think you both had your hands up. Go for it.
So I'm trying to get into cybersecurity, but I really am just now learning about computers.
Okay.
Aiming for IT so far. Would you say that's a good way to go about it?
Sure. Like I said, there's not like a bad path in cybersecurity. Like the key is to find something that you're interested in learning about, because you will be learning about it the entire time. IT changes really fast and cybersecurity changes even faster. So you have to be willing to continue learning about whatever you're learning about. My job is very political now. I spend a lot of time talking to other agencies and other government heads and actually, like discussing policy and spending a lot of time in meetings. But I still probably spend a couple hours a day catching up on the latest cybersecurity news. And that's not even a joke. Like, I probably go through a couple thousand articles online a day, just keeping aware of what's going on, because that's kind of the nature of our field. So you're gonna be learning a lot about it, and you're gonna be learning a lot about it for years and years. So no matter what you pick, make sure it's something you're not get sick of learning about.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I know you were saying like cybersecurity is just an ever-changing kind of field, but what would you say, at least right now, has the most openings
Uh,
in jobs?
So in jobs right now, everything has got a lot, because every company is kind of recognizing that they need help and they don't have it, so that they're all kind of digging. But the two biggest things right now, one of them is the biggest because everyone uses desktop computers. So like learning about desktop systems and learning about Windows security is always big. Learning about firewalls is always important. The new one right now, the hot button topic, is IoT security, because that's something people are just learning is a problem. And so everyone is kind of rushing into it to kind of secure it. But like at some point that there's going to be better management tools out there for it.
What is IoT security?
Oh, sorry. IoT is like Internet of Things security. So basically all the sensors, all the thermostats, all the smart lights out there, the camera microphones, most of them are running little embedded Linux systems. So they're all little tiny computers. And most of them have zero security on them, because a lot of these vendors have never really had to consider security. Mostly they sell this stuff to facilities departments, not IT departments, and facilities departments don't think about things like software updates, because that's not what they're used to thinking about. So they're not used to thinking about the fact that, oh, now they have this cool light that they can control via Bluetooth, that's vulnerable to an attack over Bluetooth, right? So someone who can actually go through and test those systems and learn how to lock them down is pretty valuable. And that's the buzzword for that right now is IoT, Internet of Things security. The reality of it is that 90% of that work is either just the same as doing Linux security or doing network security, right? You're locking it down on the network, or you're locking down those little embedded Linux systems. But a lot of it is the buzzword to get that job, like putting the right term on your resume. And that's a lot of it. That's what you see jobs in, but it's not necessarily a unique skill set. It's just taking your skill set and applying it towards that tool.
So what do you think of universities and colleges having cybersecurity programs specifically? You're saying that you want to get into cybersecurity, you have to be good at one thing in IT.
I think that's where you're going to need to succeed in cybersecurity. Having that cybersecurity degree will get you past HR and get you to the job interview. And that's important. But depending on who you interview with, they're going to want to see more, or they might just say, all right, cool, you can get started, learn on the job. So I don't think that having that degree is a bad thing at all. It shows what your focus is, and that's important. But I'm saying that the degree alone will not be enough.
So what advice would you give for someone who's starting out in IT that feels overwhelmed by all the information they can learn, like all the mass amount of information they can learn about cybersecurity and IT?
The thing to remember is that IT, even though colleges make it into one degree, and even though job postings have it as just one department, IT is probably something like 70 or 80 different fields. And cybersecurity, as a result, is something like 70 or 80 different fields. The jobs and the colleges aren't going to narrow those fields down for you, because their job is to get someone through fast and get them hired. And the companies are just trying to get someone hired, and HR people aren't IT people. Your job is to find which one of those fields is interesting to you and focus on that field. It's overwhelming to try to learn about everything. You can't, because you're one person, you're not 70 people. So don't try to learn about everything. Learn all the basics and then focus on one thing. And like that's going to be something you're going to have to do throughout your career. So learning how to do that is actually a pretty core skill. Yeah.
There's nothing really stopping you from this when you do specialize into a specific field. If you decide you want to jump around something else, you can go ahead and specialize into that as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's nothing stopping you, and often you will have to, right? Because sometimes what you specialize in will be great for a company, but a company might move down the line and switch their business model, right? And they're going to do something different. If you want to keep your job, you're going to have to switch. So it's kind of good to be able to have that mentality of, all right, now I got to learn this new thing. This is true in programming as well, right? It's not just in security. When I went through college, everyone learned C and C++. You're going to have a hard time finding a job with C and C++ right now. You're going to want to learn Python. If you went into science like I did, you learn Fortran, but now it's really R, and sometimes Python, sometimes Mathematica, right? It's technology changes, and being the kind of person that can change with it is an asset, not a hindrance. So having interests that change is actually a good thing for you. Yeah.
How can somebody show an interviewer that they are good, like and active in a certain thing, like that they actually specialize in that one thing? Like, what's a good way to show someone who's interviewing you that you're actually interested in the topic, that you're specializing in?
There's two things that almost every interview I've ever been in or sat in as a part of the panel or as an applicant have done. One thing is they'll usually ask if you do anything on the side or any personal projects, and you can talk about stuff there. But the other thing is they'll ask you, do you have any questions for us? Never say, no, I don't have anything. Because that is your one chance to find out about the company before they make you an offer. If you have a special project or a special interest, say, hey, I really like doing these kinds of things. Do you do anything with that? Dig a little more into what projects the company has. One of the things that I like to do, I'm big onto like the OSINT side of things. Are you guys familiar with OSINT is? Like open source intelligence, digging into a company, like digging into something online. I will sit there and try to research a company before I interview. And I'll sit there and try to learn about what they're doing. And then I have years and years of experience about solving companies' problems and years of experience about dealing with companies' architecture. So I'll sit there and I'll go, if I was this company and I was working on these projects, what would my problems be, right? And then I will try to think up of a solution. And then during that question phase, I'll say, I understand you guys were working on this. Did you guys encounter this problem, right? And that almost always kind of catches someone's attention. And if they say, yeah, and I'm like, I was thinking about that, and like, this is kind of what I would do with it. Can you tell me why you did it, or why did that work? Did that not work? What the issues were? And that immediately will grab a company's attention, because whether or not my answer was right, they know that I'm thinking about their problems already. I interviewed for a company that, unbeknownst to me, they'd actually been hacked 2 to 3 days before I started, right? And one of the questions, they didn't know how the attackers had gotten in, but one of the questions they asked me was, so if you're going to attack us, how would you do it? I was applying for a cybersecurity and pen testing job, right? And I'd actually spent a lot of time learning about how this company's architecture worked. It helped a little bit that I had a couple of friends who used to work for them. So I knew how their software interacted with other people. And I said, well, I think based on your model, what I know of you, you guys do this and this, and you interact with here, and you do these things. And if I were an attacker, I kind of assumed that you had this part locked down, but these connections you have with these things, those are a lot harder to lock down, especially from this one, and that's where I would come in. And they hadn't thought of that. And that actually ended up being how the attacker got it in, which is how I got that job. Which I think at first they kind of panicked because they're like, was this guy the guy that attacked us? But yeah, like that's actually researching a company and showing your interest in the company matters a lot. Even if you are a weaker candidate to someone else that applied, they're going to want the person that's interested in the company versus the person that's really strong, but they think may not be interested and is going to jump ship, right? So showing that you are interested in a company matters a lot. I also have been a hiring manager for over a decade. So if you guys have any questions about interviews and stuff like that, I'm happy to answer that as well. So, yeah,
I did have a quick question.
Sure.
Let's say somebody, whether they're watching online or in person, have like maybe they want to like email you or something. Like, is there contact information that you can leave?
Sure. I'm very active on Discord. I think I just jumped into your guys' Discord, and I run the cybersecurity Discord. I run the Discord for SYNSHOP, which is the hackerspace in town. You can jump into that Discord as well. You can hit me up there, like on Discord. You can email me. My email is aakin@aakin.net. You just have to figure out how to spell my name. Those are probably the two easiest way to get a hold of me. If you email me, I get a ton of spam because I've had my domain since 1996. So, oh, nice.
So I got that for you.
Yeah, awesome. So I get a ton of spam. So just like mention that you saw me at this meeting, and you know, like, and or in like the subject line or whatever, and like I'm happy to answer emails and stuff too. Those are probably the two easiest ways to get a hold of me.
So what is the SYNSHOP?
So the SYNSHOP is like a hackerspace and a makerspace. It's basically like a community space, like a club space. We built it around the idea of we wanted a bunch of us got together and wanted like a makerspace in town, which there wasn't one of back when we started the shop. So it's a place where we have like all the tools to come and work on projects, and you come and work on projects around other people. And we have all the tools and the space to work on them. And there's like a wood shop and a machine shop and electronics area, and then craft space, laser cutters, 3D printers, and like a printing area, and like a bunch of other things. We have cybersecurity nights. We partner with DC 702, which is the local DEF CON group. We host their meetings once a month. We do a lot of different activities. We're going to start doing robot fights in partnership with one of the BattleBot groups. You're welcome to come and hang out anytime. If you want to use the equipment, you got to become a member, which is like $50 a month. But yeah, we have a lot of people that just come and hang out, or like, you know, just chill there for a while, and like that's always welcome too.
Discounts for students? It's used to be discount.
We don't really. We work as an educational nonprofit, so the bills are we charge a membership based on the bare minimum of what it costs to keep the place running. No one's paid there. All the money goes directly back into the shop, paying the mortgage on the place, paying our utility bills, and like paying to upgrade equipment. So we can't really afford to discount it much. We did drop the rate when we moved into this place because we could like cut our monthly cost down a little bit, but that's kind of how we keep it maintained. So yeah, unfortunately that one we can't do. The other thing is we don't actually get too many student memberships in general because most schools actually have their own maker spaces. So
We have most of what we need here. So
yeah,
everything you guys would need to basically do any project, you could probably find it on campus.
yeah, it's the same. It's the same deal with UNLV. Although we get a flood of UNLV students every November and every April with like 1 month memberships, just for the month, because all the architecture and all the engineering students are rushing to do their final projects at the last minute, and the labs that are there are overwhelmed.
Bump up your rates? Yeah, right.
We don't really do that. But yeah, like that, we noticed a trend where we have a spike in memberships just for April and just in November, and it took us a while to correlate that with with the architecture and the engineering final project times, which we thought was pretty funny. But yeah, was there anything else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you said you researched like about 1,000 articles about cybersecurity a day. What are your favorite places to get those articles from?
I think it's like 1,000 articles in general, and probably like about half of them are cybersecurity, and then I'm just interested in a lot of other stuff too. And now I kind of do a lot of stuff on the political side of things because that's kind of the nature of my job with my office. But man, I use an RSS reader, and I highly recommend everyone use an RSS reader of some sort. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it or not. You are, I see. So RSS is a technology that most websites on the internet use, and very few people are aware of. And basically what it is it just sends out a broadcast of every new article on that site. So if you have an RSS reader that collects all those in one place, and you can subscribe to all your news feeds. So I use an RSS reader called Feedly. There's a ton of other ones out there. But it used to actually be built into your browser too, but most of them kind of dropped that its functionality at some point. But I will like the big ones for me are, I know Believing Computer is good, Dark Reading is good, Ars Technica is pretty good. I like Slashdot just seems to collect things that other sites miss, but they're like 3 days late on everything. Oh man, there's a lot. There's probably like 40 or 50 things in my security. I'll send you guys a list afterwards of the sites I follow, but I'm bad about coming up with it off the top of my head. But yeah, like I highly recommend an RSS reader for everyone. There's paid ones, there's free ones. They all work fairly well, and it's a great way to look at a lot of sites in one page. So you just go to one site, and then all the new articles for the day are there. And you just kind of just go through them and read the ones you want, don't read the ones you don't want. Like a lot of times just seeing the headline is enough to know what's going on there, and you don't need to dig into the article. And sometimes you're like, I need to know more about that, and you go load up the article and learn more.
I have a question for you.
Yep.
What role does the government play in protecting like everybody in cybersecurity? Like your job, what is it? What is your role protecting everybody here in the room, I guess?
We are a very odd state in that we want the government to do nothing at all here.
Right.
So the role of the government right now in this state is kind of minimal, especially at the state level, which is where I am. My office reports to the governor's office, and there is, let's say, a lack of desire for central anything. So our role is mostly coordinating with other government entities, all the states and cities, counties, tribal entities, educational systems, and stuff like that, and making sure that everyone has the resources they need, everyone's aware of the rules and laws, and coordinating activities between each other. But additionally, one of the things that I'm active in right now, we have currently the legislature session is active. I don't know if you guys are familiar with how the Nevada legislature works. We're very weird in that regard as well. Our legislature meets for 6 months every 2 years, and that's it. So most of our people only get elected for one 6-month session, even though they're elected for 2 years, because nothing happens the other 18 months that they're in office. So right now we're in the middle of the legislature, and the bills are coming fast and furious because they're trying to get things done. So part of my office's role is to actually look at all these bills, see what the cybersecurity impact is, and discuss it with them and actually like give testimony in that regard. There's a bill out there right now, for example, for cryptocurrency fraud, and it's a good premise in that they kind of want to put out some protection for the residents of the state against cryptocurrency fraud, and it's to put some restrictions on businesses working in cryptocurrency and make them contribute to like a fraud protection fund. But the way the bill written is not actually practical to implement because the people who wrote the bill don't understand how IP addresses and technology work, right? So the way the bill is written is that any traffic that flows through Nevada or any data center in Nevada that involves cryptocurrency is affected by this rule. And I'm like, good luck ever enforcing that, right? Like, like Akamai or like Cloudflare has their space in like every switch data center in the state, and traffic flows in and out of there or whatever, but it may not ingress or egress in the state, right? It may not affect a state resident, but according to this bill, they'd be subject to it. And I'm like, that's not going to fly. So part of my role there is to kind of talk them through how to do that in a way that's actually sensible and actually helps us. So the role of the government in the state primarily is to work through legislation to affect fraud, affect crime, and like the problems and the punishments for that. That's at the central level. At the local and the county and the city level, the role of the government is to actually work with prosecuting crimes that have been committed and working to enforce that crimes are not committed. And that's a little bit of a different role than what I have. That's more like the role of Metro or the roles of like the city IT system for the public IT systems. Like some of the cities and counties are actually setting up a county-run or a city-run Wi-Fi system for their residents. So part of the city's role there would be make sure that that stuff is run without a lot of fraud happening on that system, right? Like they don't want to be subject to that and deal with that. So that's involved there. Yeah.
So would your department also deal with like electronic voter fraud and stuff like that, or is that up to like the company?
So I work with the Secretary of State's office, who is responsible for voting systems, to ensure that we have robust processes in place and coordination plans in place with the company that makes the voting systems to make sure all that stuff is tested. And I've been working with them to kind of see it set up to make sure, like they recently went through an audit of their policies, and they're going through and beefing up their security program to make sure that they have all the testing in place. And I'm kind of talking with their staff to make sure that they have the resources they need to do that testing correctly. I thought I saw a hand here somewhere. No, okay. Anything else? All right. So one of the other things I've done in the past is actually work with like crime enforcement and forensics. That's another field of cybersecurity that's always in need, although the nature of those jobs change. When I started doing that, it was very much working to do forensics on desktop systems, and that's still sometimes needed, but that's not needed at a central authority level, right? When I started doing that, I would work with the FBI to investigate crimes against larger organizations or governments. Nowadays, desktop forensics is basically companies dealing with malware on their system or a phishing attack or an insider threat. So the nature of that technology and that kind of job has changed. What crime forensics almost always focuses on, and I think you guys will see this in the shifting nature of your courses, because I know that Metro has been actually working with the advisory board for cybersecurity to change some of the cyber forensics courses, is on mobile and mobile device forensics, because almost all crime now and crime investigations happens through digging into mobile systems, because that is a much more accessible source of data and often where a lot of the communication happens that crime is revolving around, and where a lot of their target tracking and their target intelligence comes from. So that's an example of how cybersecurity has kind of changed over time, right? And the people who've done those jobs had to shift from being like desktop forensic experts to like working on mobile systems, which is fundamentally completely different. But that's the nature of what they need to keep on doing to work on their jobs. So that was kind of like an example of how that has changed. Are there any other subjects you guys want me to talk about?
What would you say is a good pathway to get into the forensic side?
I think they're actually setting up some courses for that here, if I remember right. And that's a good way to do it. But the other thing is to actually, um, there's a lot of good online information around how to do forensics on mobile devices. Get yourself an old Android phone or an old iPhone. Like, you can buy old ones for cheap. Start like experimenting with them. Start grabbing some of the free software and learning about it. I don't know if the school's got a Celebrite license.
Celebrate, I don't think.
No,
No.
we don't.
Okay. Because that would have been something useful. But like, I know Metro does internships through the school, correct?
We do, yes.
Yeah, and that would be a path I would actually pursue if forensics is an interest for you.
And they do
Also,
have a degree for cybersecurity.
I
Yeah.
always start my forensic classes telling to students that you have to have like clear background to pursue
Yeah.
a forensic degree.
Yeah, they're gonna be very particular about who they hire for something like that. So that's actually pretty important. Especially if you go on the government side, because they're gonna probably do a background check for a clearance, and that's a very, very in-depth investigation that they do there. So that actually matters. The other thing is, if you want to do forensics on the desktop side and not on the crime side, like, that's much easier to get into. The Kali toolkit is pretty good. There's somethingware is another one. There's 2 or 3 toolkits out there for like Windows forensics and Unix forensics that are basically open source available, and just practicing on that side is really good too. If you want to really go on to mobile forensics but you don't have access to the tools, saying, hey, this is the forensics I've done on the desktop side, and it's a very big interest of mine, and I've gotten good at this, and I want to learn the mobile side, always looks good on a job application too. So there's a lot of paths you can pursue there.
And you can always download demo version of like commercial product. And as a student, you can contact their sales and say, I'm a student, I'm learning about this product, and could you please give me more time? I had Celebrate for almost 2 years like this. It was enough time to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. What else?
Question. You mentioned a Metro internship through the school. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that?
So I think Metro reaches out to the school to look for interns from time to time, when Metro PD, when they have internships. A lot of organizations will actually do that. They'll reach out here, they'll reach out to UNLV. They will reach out and ask for students who are interested in their particular field. And I know I've gotten interns through the CSN program that I ended up hiring on full time. So, and that was when I worked at the airport. Like, I know that is something a lot of organizations in town do. So I'm not sure what the process for that is internally, but I know.
I think I had brilliant students who applied for Metro, but they are not cannabis friendly. So if you smoked or did edibles in the last 3 years, they will deny you on the spot. And lying about this also will not
Yeah.
help because you will have to go through the like.
On the government side, they're also not cannabis friendly, but oftentimes, depending on the organization, it may be you have to pass a drug test and then be clean from there on out. They don't care about, because it's legal in the state. Some places will not enforce past history. They care about present and future. So that very much depends on the organization. I know the airport, for example, because I was their CISO for 6 years, I know the airport rules really well. But the airport gets a lot of their funding from FAA, so they are subject to federal regulations, not state regulations. So there is zero tolerance for any cannabis history there, right? So that actually is another thing to consider based on where you apply. Also, different organizations have different personalities, and depending on what you are like, you may want to pick for a place that suits your personality. Not every place is great for every organization. I would not work for a lot of organizations. Even though I work with them all the time, I wouldn't want to work for them because the way I do things and the way they do things just don't match. And I want to be like happy and successful at my job, not just always at odds.
That's why you ask those questions, right, at the interview.
Yeah.
That part, and then as you're, make sure you're talking with your professors if you're looking for stuff. Like, I've gotten stuff through professors countless times at CSN, so just reach out.
Yeah.
To them and ask them.
Reach out to your professors and let them know you're interested because usually the companies reach out to the advisory board, which is your professors, and they will reach out to the students they know are interested.
They also just did a big hiring fair, like a career fair.
Right.
Look back in the emails and find out who is in charge of that, and they can probably get you hooked up with Metro. Because they were just here trying to recruit. So.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
MSTS, the national test site, they also do student internship that I got into. Pretty nice. And it's not like cybersecurity, it's more just IT. I work like just Splunk. But they do actually, you're not just like an intern that gets coffee, they like actually have stuff for you. And
Having
it's a
Splunk
test site.
is actually very, very useful for cybersecurity. One thing that I can tell you is that most cybersecurity jobs are not pen testing. Like 99% of the jobs have zero pen testing. They're almost all on the defense side, and a large part of the defense side is digging through logs. Splunk is a pretty invaluable skill for that. So that will carry you well in almost any cybersecurity role. A company may not necessarily use Splunk, they may use an equivalent tool, but knowing that you know how to do data searches and log analysis actually matters a lot. How many of you guys can do any scripting? That's pretty awesome. I highly recommend everyone learn a little bit. A lot of your job in most roles will be made tremendously easier if you can automate the trivial stuff. And there will be so much trivial stuff. Pretty much every time I interview, I will ask people, I will give them, like I'll write on the whiteboard, I'm like, you have like a text file full of just thousands and thousands of these lines. Just find for me everything in column 3. How do you do that?
You need a bash script for that.
Bash script is great. That's what I would use because I'm a Unix guy. I don't care what you use. Just show me how to do that. If you can't do that, you're going to have a very hard time doing any of the stuff that you're going to need to do day to day in my working for me. Not everyone's going to ask that kind of question specifically, but a lot of people are going to ask very similar questions. And showing you have some experience in being able to automate away the boring stuff matters a lot. I forget what that was in response to, but.
No worries. We're talking about Splunk, actually.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if anyone knows what this is. Everybody knows what Splunk is?
I use it in my job.
You use that too? Nice. Yeah, it's just like data ingestion. It just takes logs, like any type of event. You can put, say Splunk, I want any of this event that comes up at this place, I want information on it, and Splunk will give it all.
Splunk will give you a free license as a student. And even if you're not a student, they give you a free license for a very small Splunk instance. Splunk prices by the amount of data you send into there every day. Their free model only allows you 500 megabytes in a day. If you're generating 500 megabytes of logs at your home systems, you're doing something very wrong. So
For veterans, they have really good
discounts as well, yeah.
discounts and free training as well.
Yeah. Does GitHub still do their student pack?
I think they do, yeah. I'm pretty sure.
That is something else to look into. It's actually a great tool. GitHub partners with a bunch of other companies to basically give like a free, I think it's just called Student Pack. Yeah. Yeah, there you go, Student Pack.
Splunk also does a lot of training seminars. I get like 100 emails from them.
Yeah.
They do a ton, like they're free.
So-
It's like a boot camp.
You can sign up for this for free with your EDU email address. And if you scroll down there, I think that it just tells you what's in it. But yeah, it gives you tons and tons of like little free limited tool sets of hundreds of different tools, including like a free DigitalOcean instance, which is like a VM system online. There should be like a free Visual Studio package. There's like a free Azure instance. There's a lot of cool stuff it gives you. definitely take advantage of this and start digging into the stuff you think is interesting. There's a lot of cool tools in there which you will use in almost any job you go into. But I'm mostly here to answer like other questions you guys might have about getting into cybersecurity. So anything you have, feel free to shoot it out, or like anything about working in IT in general, or interview process, stuff like that.
You said that a lot of companies, they focus on the defense side. What kind of company would focus on the attacking side?
Those will usually be consulting firms. Unless you're in the government or a very, very large enterprise, you're not going to need a dedicated pen testing team. Like Amazon will have a pen testing team, right? Because they have hundreds of thousands of systems and like different components to their IT infrastructure that they need to have someone testing all the time. Companies at that scale, very, very large tech firms will have dedicated teams. Large medical enterprise, I have a friend who works, I think she actually spoke to you guys a few months ago, Emily St. Pierre. She works for a medical device manufacturer. They have a dedicated pen testing team that she works on to test all the devices before they put them out. So product manufacturers will have that as well. But it will be some sort of large company that ships a lot of products, or the company that consults with a lot of different companies as a pen tester. There's also other companies like CrowdStrike, and there's a company in town, I forget what their name is, but they basically partner as defensive partners for companies, for large firms, but they will come in when there's an attack, and then they will be doing cleanup as well as like driving the attackers out, and so it's like a mix of an offense and defense group. And there's a lot of those as well. But those will all be for basically like consulting firms or like firms that specialize in security for other companies. Yeah. Anything else?
If you come up to like a question like this and during an interview where they ask you if you have any more questions, what would be your like backup question just in case? Because I know you told us that you want to always be invested into their company.
Yeah.
Know a little bit, but I mean, for a situation like this where everybody's like, we don't know what to tell.
So a great question that I found, because I'm usually I'm always applying to security teams or to lead security teams, I will always ask, what is the current state of your cybersecurity program? You know, what is the state of the program you want me to join? And then I'll be like, what are the day-to-day tasks you see for me? Like stuff like that. Like, kind of get a feel for what they're gonna, because they're only gonna ask you questions to get a feel for your skill set. Your job is to get an idea of what they want you to be doing. And sometimes the questions they ask you about your skill set is pretty interesting, and you can kind of use that to kind of learn about what their job is, right? If there's a question that you found particularly weird, you'd be like, this question here that you asked me about, that was a bit of an unusual one, or like, can you tell me what part of my job would focus on that? Like, where would that come in useful? I'm just trying to fit it into how I see my role, and something like that. Like, kind of that's always a good way to approach it, because then you're indicating interest in what you ask. You're showing that you've been paying attention, and you're trying to figure out how you fit in.
So
right.
Two things you want to focus on is how you fit in and how you show interest into the company.
Yeah, like why the company is interesting to you. If you know anything about what the company does, talk about the things that you think is interesting about what the company does, and ask if you'll be involved with those projects. This is the other key piece of advice I can give everyone to interviewing, because I'm sure a lot of you have like interview anxiety, like I always do, and I've been interviewing for like 20-something years. There's one very key thing to remember when you interview, and this is the most important thing to not forget. You're kind of desperate for a job, but any job will do for you. They need someone with the skill set they think you have because you have made it to the interview. They need someone so bad, they're putting money on the line, and no company wants to give up money. They do not want to do it, right? That money is theirs, they do not want to give it to you. But they're putting money on the line to bring you in and pay you money to solve their problem. They need you that badly. And they don't want to look for anyone else. They want to be done with the interview right then. So always remember that like no matter what you do, they are not going to be interviewing and giving up money unless they absolutely needed you. For you, any company will do. That is not true for them. They need someone with your skill set specifically. And that's a very important thing to remember. And it helps a lot in the conversation you have with the company, right? And it'll help you, like at least for me, that helps put me in a better space to actually handle the interview questions well. What else? Oh yeah.
As someone who struggles to get to the interview in the first place, one consistent distinction I see a lot when it comes to job listings, job postings, is a difference between skills and working skills. It seems like there's frequently some kind of distinction employers see between skills that you develop specifically from job history and skills that you develop from personal time. Would you say that there's a difference, or would that be relevant or meaningful?
There is sometimes. A lot of that actually kind of breaks down to what I said earlier about HR not understanding IT well. You will notice that in tech firms, like tech companies specifically, that distinction isn't as strong because a lot of them realize that a lot of technology is spent learning on your own time. A lot of technological skill comes from personal interest and personal drive. A lot of non-tech firms will sometimes make that distinction on the HR side of things. And there are ways to address that in your resume. You can write, like I have a skills section up top where I just list all my skills, and that is separate from where I talk about I list the skills up top and things I'm skilled at, and my job section focuses on duties, which you can draw the connection between the two, but you can also word it in ways that kind of tell you that you can have things in your skills that doesn't necessarily correlate to your duties because it's things that you have learned on your own. But you don't need to specify, oh yeah, I just kind of mess with this project on the side, right? If you feel confident in your skill with something that you've taught yourself, put it up in your skills section. And in your duty section, talk about things more in abstract, like manage, like if you're a Windows admin, right? Say manage an AD directory tree. Don't talk about the specific type of technology you worked on. But if you've managed your AD directory tree, but you're also really interested in authentication and LDAP and stuff like that, you can put in your skill sections like NTLM, LDAP, Kerberos, right? And then you kind of see in the duty section, you see Windows AD administrator. You're like, oh, they're an AD administrator and they're skilled at all the authentication stuff. That's a good combination, right? But even if you didn't actually do Kerberos for your job, it's still a skill that's relevant to your job, and you kind of bring it in that way.
And I also meant to include it in my question. Would you say that skills or information gained specifically from an education environment would also be as relevant?
It's all relevant. I think that there's no substitute for hands-on troubleshooting, and I think most people feel that way. But you can kind of tell when you're interviewing someone and you're looking at like 20 years of work history, you know that's going to be better than someone fresh out of college. And anyone who doesn't think that is putting unreasonable expectations on their candidate, and you probably don't want to be working at a company that has that kind of unreasonable expectation. That's the other thing that I've actually started doing that's been really helpful. I've been using job postings to screen out companies I don't want to work at. I took in
Rose.
in 2001, I think I took a class in Python with at Linux World in New York City, and back then Linux World was really small. It was only like 5,000 people. This class was taught by Guido Erasmus, who actually wrote Python, right? And one of the things that he said was that like he was, you know, like we were having like drinks and after the class, whatever, and hanging out. And he told me he was telling people like funny stories. And one of the stories he was telling, like someone actually said that they worked at a company, and he was like, I applied for a job at that company, writing Python. They turned me down because I didn't have enough years experience, right? And he was a creator of Python. He was like, they wanted 15 years experience, and I only wrote Python 5 years ago. So sometimes expectations are unreasonable. If you see a company that's got a lot of job postings with unreasonable expectations, don't apply there. You're not going to be happy there. They're going to just try to grind you out, and they're probably going to replace you with someone else soon. But yeah, it's kind of funny when stuff like that happens.
So it seems like a lot of companies looking at their websites and their job postings have a lot of expectation for experience, 5 years, 1 year, all this experience. How do you get that experience when you can't get the job?
That's a tricky one. One thing I could say is one, this isn't the answer to that question, but it's something that's relevant to that question, is that look at those postings very carefully, because a lot of times they will say experience or equivalence, and they will count things like certificates or school time or parallel experience as relevant. Also, a lot of times they'll post job postings and they'll say, we are looking for any of the following. You don't need all of them. They just want some of them. And they're looking, it's like one posting for screening a large variety of candidates. And in those cases, feel free to apply. But if you want to definitely commit to something, you know this is the thing you want experience in and the thing you want to work in, one of the best ways to gain that experience is to go look for open source projects that use those technologies and tools and volunteer with them. I have a friend who got a job specifically because he volunteered with NPM writing, working with their Python library. Just like helping out like with their open source stuff. And then once he actually ended up on that team and his name was in like the team credits, he was able to land a job immediately because it's a very recognized tool. And open source tools are always hurting for help because it's people committing their free time. And people don't really have free time to commit. So if you have time that you can commit to that to build up experience with a project like that, with a project that's known and recognized, one, it is experience, you're building up experience. But two, you're a part of a team. Like you can list that on a resume, worked on NPM, right? Which may not mean stuff to a lot of people, but for people for whom NPM is relevant for their jobs, they're gonna be like, what? All right, let's talk to that person. That's gonna make your resume immediately stand out. And yeah, that's, I think, a good way. Internships are a great way. They never require experience because you're assuming interns coming in inexperienced. And they almost always are only ever given to students. So take advantage of being a student to get those internships because that's direct experience. That's a job you can list on your resume. The airport's a part of Clark County. And then, so the airport follows the county rules. Clark County and any Clark County entity, and there's a lot of them, will only ever hire interns who are active full-time students. Actually, I'm not sure about the full-time, but active students, I know for a fact. So that's very important. And the county internships are all paid. So that is an easy way into a job that is beyond what you could get by default. And it's also an easy transition into a job down the line. because many companies, if you work out in your internship, you'll know pretty soon. They either won't renew you after a few months, or you're going to be working there for the entirety of your student career. And if you're working there for the entirety of your student career, they're probably going to make a job for you by the time you graduate. So it's a good way into an organization as well.
Any last question? We're running out of time, guys. Anyone have any other questions that you need answered?